What's going on, guys? This is Ben with liftedimports.com again, and we're here to talk about more lifted Subaru stuff. And today I wanted to talk about the Subaru Crosstrek and some of the different tire sizes that people are running. Before we jump into that, if there's any other stuff that you guys have questions on, leave it in the comments and head over to the liftedimports.com website. There's a lot of good info over there. There's a bunch of good build features from other people that are just like us that have already lifted their Subarus and are taking them off-road. And everybody that we've interviewed has actually been kind enough to give us the whole rundown on all the parts that they used and kind of the process that they went through in modifying their Subaru to take it off-road. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it today. And what I want to talk about is what some of the biggest sizes are that people are running on Crosstrek. So we're going to talk about first gen Crosstrek, second gen Crosstrek. We're going to talk about the third gen Crosstrek, which has recently just been released. I guess it's got a little bit of time on it now, but just going to go over kind of some different things to think about before you put a bigger tire on your Crosstrek, some different things that you want to consider as you, just kind of jump into this whole thing. It can be kind of intimidating, and hopefully we can sort of point you in the right direction and get you something that works best for what you're trying to do. So right out of the gate, first off, I don't own a Crosstrek. I've driven them. I used to sell them. I worked for Subaru for a little bit of time. I've interviewed a lot of people that own them, that have modified them for off-road. I've helped people fit bigger tires on their Crosstrek. I've been driving lifted Subarus for about a decade, so I've got a pretty good handle on the ins and outs of how all this stuff works and some of the things to be aware of. And I'm also in this stuff on a daily basis. I'm always looking at new stuff that people are doing. I'm friends with a lot of people that are also in this culture of off-roading and Subarus. So let's go ahead and jump in. And one of the first things that I want to tell you right out of the gate, if you own a first gen Crosstrek, be aware that it's a little bit different than if you own a second gen Crosstrek. So first gen Crosstreks have a smaller wheel well area, and what will fit in a second gen, and when I say second gen, what I'm talking about is 2018 up to 2023. And prior to that, you're gonna have, I wanna say it's 2013 up to the 2017 that Subaru had. That was the initial Crosstrek release, was that first generation in 2013 up to 17. Those had a slightly smaller wheel well. They were a little bit more closely related to the Impreza from what I could tell. They had much more similar body styling and proportion. And one of the things that carried over in that regard was the wheel wells. So if you got somebody saying, oh, you can fit a 29-inch tire on a first gen, yes, you can, but it does require a little bit more work. There's going to be some trimming that's going to have to be done. There's going to be some heat gun activities that's going to need to happen. So just be aware of that. If you own a first gen, it's definitely a little bit different than if you're running a second or third gen. Now, what I want to say before we kind of jump into some of the common sizes that people are running is there's two kind of people. There's, in this situation, as far as off-roading in Subarus and modifying Subarus for off-road, there's going to be two kinds of people. The first type of person is somebody that is very casual with car modifications. This is going to be somebody who is like, hey, I don't really want to cut anything on my car. I don't want to modify anything on my car permanently. You know, somebody that doesn't want any headache, just wants the most worry-free, easy option for modifying their vehicle. They just want to be able to do bolt-on stuff. They don't want to do anything that they couldn't return it to stock form and no one would ever know. So that's the first type of person, is I would say like somebody that's looking for what I would call worry-free fitment. That's kind of a thing that I came up with, which just means you don't want to worry about anything and you want the whole process to be simple. Now the second kind of person is someone like me, a real miscreant, somebody that does not give a fudge to take a cutting wheel or a hacksaw or whatever it is man, if I need to rip off a fender and chop it up with the cutting wheel in order to fit a set of tires, you better believe that's exactly what I'm going to do. I don't care if my car looks like a clapped out toaster box by the time I get it to where I want it to be. I don't give a fudge if I got to rip out mud flaps, if I got to cut bumpers, if I got to cut fenders, if I got to use a heat gun to massage the fender liners out of the way. That's exactly what I'm going to do. So if you're that type of person, you now have access to a little bit more tire options if you're willing to kind of go to that level of modification. So you kind of have to figure out what camp you fall into, because you can make anything fit if you're willing to cut and keep cutting until it fits. I don't necessarily recommend that, but this is just so that you kind of understand when someone says, oh, of course you can fit that tire size. Yeah, you probably can, but you just got to understand that they may be coming from a different place. They might be a person like me that thinks everybody thinks like them, because I recognize that not everybody is willing to take a $25,000 Crosstrek that they bought and just start hacking it up. I honestly, I wouldn't really advise that. I mean, if you're really well off, then hey, whatever. You're a little more brave than I am for chopping up a new car. Okay, so let's get down to the nitty-gritty of what this means. For first-gen Crosstreks, I'm just going to say right out of the gate, if you own a first-generation 2013 up to 2017 and you don't want to cut anything, if you want the worry-free fitment, I'm going to tell you that the best tire size you can run is going to be the 215/75 R15. What that means is you're going to need to get an aftermarket 15-inch wheel, and there's a lot of options out there. I recommend looking for something that's a 15/7. You can go with Method MR502s. What else we got? We got Black Rhino. I'm running Black Rhinos right now. Absolutely love them. There's Motegi. Motegi makes a bunch of good wheels for our cars. And the list goes on. If you're not sure what wheels are available, you can check out. I got so many articles on good wheels that you can look into. Just head over to the website. You'll find exactly what you need. 215/75 R15 is a fantastic size for you first-gen people, regardless of what your comfort level is with modification, because you will be able to fit those with essentially no modification. You might have a little bit of rubbing at full lock depending on your wheel choice and depending on whether or not you want to be lifted or not, but that size is absolutely fantastic. It's going to have more sidewall than the stock tires. The 215/75 R15, it's a 27.8 overall diameter. Basically, it's an inch taller, like from top to bottom, it's a full inch taller than what your first-gen Crosstrek came with. So it's going to give you a ½ inch of extra ground clearance. It's not going to weigh down the transmission and the engine. You're not going to feel a huge loss of power. You're not going to feel really bogged down. You'll still have a car that functions great. Your braking power is not going to feel greatly reduced. Miles per gallon are going to be relatively similar. You're obviously going to lose a little bit, but that, in my opinion, is one of the best sizes for people from a practical standpoint, and for first-gen people, it's going to fit and you're not going to have to chop the car up. Now, if you're like me, if I owned a first-gen Crosstrek, you know it would be game over and I'd be cutting on it day one. If you're willing to take a cutting wheel and gently carve out the front of the front bumper, and you're willing to take a heat gun and massage some of the fender liner out of the way, and you're willing to remove the mud flaps or cut little pieces of the mud flaps out, which I don't think is a big deal, you'll have to do that, and you'll have to do some extra work in the rear. You'll have to probably do a lift kit that has multi-link spacers in the rear to make sure you're not rubbing on the front part of the wheel arch. You might even have to take, again, a little bit of a cutting tool to that to make it work. You can absolutely fit 235/75 R15s on a first-gen Crosstrek, but please just know that there's going to be cutting involved, but you can do it. Now, it'll weigh down the drivetrain a little bit more. You will experience a fuel economy loss, slower acceleration. You will experience a lengthened braking distance, and just it'll feel a little bit more heavy because it is going to be heavier. But if you really want something that's max size for going off-road, 235 75 15 can be fit on either first gen Crosstreks with a lot of extra work or a second gen Crosstrek with almost no work. So you can fit these on a second gen Crosstrek with very minimal trimming, sometimes depending on wheel selection and tire selection, because there can be discrepancies between different tire brands, but you can fit that on a second gen Crosstrek with no lift and almost no modification. But again, like I said, that's something to consider when you are shopping for tires. Just know that there can be, quarter-inch difference sometimes between different tire brands. So what is a 235 75 15 from one company may have a slightly bigger or smaller overall diameter in real life than the next guy. So just be aware of that. That's something that I've found over the years, that there can be a discrepancy there, and you just kind of have to be ready for that. So if you're cutting it close, just know that you might have to be a little bit more brave and strategic with your tire endeavors. Now, I know that was a real basic rundown, but just a recap on first gen Crosstrek. My opinion, stick with 215 75 R15 if you're willing to go aftermarket. If you don't want to do aftermarket wheels on your Crosstrek, you could run a 225 60 R17, but if you do that, just know that you're not going to have as much sidewall available to you, which means you can't air down as much, means it's not going to be as durable, on the trail. More sidewall means that you've got a little bit more cushion and a little bit more just meat to the tire that can kind of absorb impacts and just different damage that it might take while you're on the trail. So be aware of that. But you can definitely run those two sizes. Those would be the two sizes that I would run if, like, let's say it was my mom's car. I would be putting 215 75 in the 15-inch version, or I would be running this 225 60 R17 on the stock wheels if somebody wanted to stick with stock wheels. Those are the two sizes that I would recommend for first gen Crosstrek owners. So let's go ahead and transition into second gen Crosstrek owners. 215 75 R15 is still going to be the best overall option. It's going to do the best of everything. It's going to do the best off-road, on-road, and be the easiest to fit no matter what. It's going to literally be headache free. It's literally going to be like the most absolute worry free fit on a second gen Crosstrek. Now with second gen Crosstreks, you do have more room in the wheel arches. You could absolutely run the 235 75 R15, which has roughly a 29-inch overall diameter. Just know that it is going to weigh the car down a little bit more. It is going to be an additional amount of unsprung weight that the car is going to have to manage, and will absolutely change the driving experience. If you want the best of both worlds in a second gen Crosstrek, I would absolutely recommend the same thing and stick with the 215 75 R15. If the car is going to be used heavily for off-roading, or if you're just like me and you like to kind of do things to the maximum or to the extreme, the 235 75 will fit even without a lift. There's lots of people that have done it. You can check all over Instagram. You can check some of the photos that's up on the liftedimports.com website. I've literally taken photos of people that are running that tire with no lift. There's people all over the forums that have run it. Now it's a tight fit and you don't have a lot of wheel travel, and that's something to consider if you run the 235 75 with no lift and you start going off road and the wheel gets tucked up into the fender. You're gonna run the risk of smashing that tire up into the fender and things like that. You're just not going to have as much room. So I recommend running a lift if you're going to go off-road and put that big of a tire. But as far as fitment goes, you can definitely put it on there without the lift. So let's say, you know, you're getting your bread up, you're trying to get some money, getting the money together, and you need new tires in the meantime. You don't have to worry about whether or not they're going to fit. So you can absolutely do the 235s. The 235/75 R15, like I said, it's about 29 inches in overall diameter. If you don't want to do the 15-inch tires and you want to stick with a 17, you could actually run a 235/65 R17, which has the same overall diameter, but it will fit on most of the stock wheels that came on Crosstreks. Now I know some Crosstreks, like the limited trim, came with your 18-inch option. If you have 18s on the Crosstrek, my opinion, if you want off-road tires, ditch those 18s, sell them to some hot boy kid that wants to put them on his Civic or something, and run something else. But 235/60 18, if you have a limited trim Crosstrek, has that same overall diameter of about 29 inches, give or take. But that size is not going to give you a whole lot of sidewall. It's not hard to pinch sidewalls when you've got something that skinny. That's just my opinion. I'm not a huge fan of low profile tires. Now let's say you own a set of 16-inch wheels that you have on hand and you want to run those on the Crosstrek. You could also do 225/70 R16. It's still going to be smaller than 29. It's about 28.5 inches. So it's not quite the biggest, but it's also not very small. You could absolutely run that size. That's probably what I would run if I had a 16-inch wheel that I wanted to use on a Crosstrek. And for those of you that have the Crosstrek Sport, I don't have a lot of experience with the Sport trim at all. Like, I've never worked on one. I've never checked the fitment with a 15-inch wheel. So if you have a Sport package, I don't know for sure if they have bigger brakes or not, but that would be something to consider. You may want to check into sticking with a 16 or a 17-inch wheel in that situation. As far as third-gen Crosstreks go, I haven't worked on one of these yet. I don't know anybody that owns a third-gen Crosstrek yet that has done a lot of fitment work. But what I do know is that you cannot fit a 15-inch wheel on the new 2024 and up Crosstreks. So you're not going to be able to do the 235/75/15. You're going to be able to run the 215/75 R15. You're going to have to go with something that's a bigger wheel because the brake calipers are a little bit big. Now, what I will say for third-gen Crosstreks, if you own one and you want to be safe, I would probably take a 235/65/17 and run that. That's probably what I would do. And again, the 235/65/17, that's got that 29-inch overall diameter, which means it's going to give you a little bit of a boost as far as ground clearance goes. But the 17-inch wheel, you are not going to run into brake caliper clearance issues, and should be a pretty hassle-free fit. If you own a 2024 Crosstrek and you've fit different wheels and different tires on them, I'd absolutely love to hear about it. Hit the comments or shoot me an email on the website. Would love to pick your brain kind of on what you've done so far. I suspect that there's wheels out there from, you know, like Motegi, Method, Black Rhino. I'm sure that some of those wheels will fit in a 16-inch. I just haven't seen anybody do it yet on the new Crosstreks. I'm still waiting to see more information come out on that. Still waiting for more people to modify those. So if it's you and you've done it, I'd love to hear from you. Would love to kind of get your feedback on what's worked for you so far. But my opinion right now, if I was giving somebody advice, which I'm not, I'm obviously never giving people advice, I'm just sharing experience, of course. And I can't be held liable for anything stupid that you do to your car. But if I was giving advice to somebody with a new 2024, again, the 235/65 R17 is what I would point them towards, because I know it's going to fit. It's going to give them a little bit more tire and sidewall, but I know it's not going to cause them any brake fitment issues. Now, when we talk about brakes and fitment, and when you hear people talk about like, oh, those wheels aren't going to clear your brakes, I've actually had people ask me, what does that mean? Why will it not fit my brakes? Basically, what it means is, I'm going to put a picture right here of a brake caliper. Now, a brake caliper, its job is to hold the brake pads, and your brake caliper is it's like a hydraulic unit that when you push your brake pedal, hydraulic fluid is forced through the brake lines into the caliper. The caliper has pistons that push the brake pads into the rotor, and that's what stops the vehicle and slows it down. Calipers are what stick out the furthest inside of your wheel, basically. So inside the barrel of your wheel, you've got your rotor, and then your caliper is going to be clamped around the rotor, and that is the outermost component that is going to run the risk of coming into contact with the surface of the barrel of your wheel. So if you have a large brake kit, that caliper is what's going to be the deciding factor on whether or not your wheel choice is going to fit over that caliper. So some people, they'll do crazy things like shave the calipers down a little bit if it's just a couple millimeters. I may or may not have done that in the past with zero problems, but I could never recommend anybody to do that, just saying. But that's what you're looking out for, and there are companies out there that make wheels that are specifically designed to fit over a larger brake system. So OEM wheels, they're not made to give you the ultimate, most robust brake clearance, but like an aftermarket Method, Black Rhino, Motegi, those are all rally-inspired, rally-designed wheels that are made to clear specific brakes that are usually pretty big. So that's what I'd be looking for if I was looking for an aftermarket wheel, just to be safe. That's all I have to say about the new 2024 stuff and brake clearance and that type of thing. I just want to make it clear that you don't want to run out and try to put a 15-inch wheel on those cars yet. Now, the next thing to consider for running a bigger tire, if you're going to change wheels, you need to consider bolt pattern. Now, the bolt pattern on first gen and second gen Crosstreks is 5x100. And what that means is you got 5 lugs on your wheels that have a 100 millimeter distance across from each other. It's 100 millimeters. Now, when you get to 2024, Subaru finally jumped and changed the hub on the third gen Crosstreks. They're no longer 5x100, they're 5x114.3, which is again in millimeters, or that's the same as 5x4.5 if you do it in inches. The cool thing about that is that opens you up to a lot of wheel options. There's a lot of older Jeeps that have a 5x4.5 inch bolt pattern. Typically those are going to be a completely different type of wheel. They're usually going to be a lot wider and have a much bigger hub bore. But just make note of that if you think you're going to buy somebody's 5x100 wheels that they have for sale that are used, they're not going to just bolt up to your 2024. You're going to have to do some shopping and find something that's got the right bolt pattern. Now, the cool part about that is you now share the same bolt pattern as current Outbacks. The current Outback, I can't remember what year they changed the Outbacks. I want to say it was 15, probably 2015. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's 2015. Not the current gen Outback, but the last one is where they transferred over from 5x100 to 5x114.3 millimeters. So you can use Outback wheels now if you want. There's tons of good aftermarket options. So that's kind of just a real brief, basic overview of fitting a larger tire. Now, I know some of you are going to say, well, what if I want to put something even bigger than those 29-inch tires? And you know what? You can absolutely do that. You can do all the cutting you want and put an even bigger tire than that, but I will say that if you go bigger than a 29-inch tire on a Crosstrek, you really are going to kill the car as far as performance and enjoyability. I will outwheel you with 29s versus you having 31s, because we've got the same gearing, but because you have 31s, or you've put all that added circumference and added weight on the car, you're not going to be able to really utilize your horsepower and your torque to really spin those tires. So that's just my quick brief overview on putting bigger tires on a Subaru Crosstrek first, second, and third gen. I probably didn't cover everything. If you want more information about it, I've got a article that kind of covers a little bit more in depth all the different nuances of this, and I have pictures on there of a lot of different vehicles with bigger tires so you can kind of see what it looks like. I've got that article on liftedimports.com. I'll pin that in the comments. If you have any questions, hit the comments or send me an email. I'd absolutely love to hear from you. If there's anything that I missed, let me know. If you have other thoughts, bang that comment section. Let me know what time it is. I absolutely appreciate you guys hanging out, sticking around. And until next time, I'm going to see you guys out there on the trails. So have a great day.